The Team Never Quit podcast is brought to you by Navy Federal Credit Union. Partner with Navy Federal Credit Union to pay down credit card debt. Learn more at NavyFederal.org. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Team Never Quit podcast. We are very excited for the show. Today we have on Chris Miller. Before we dive into Chris and his story, let's kick this off with our Patreon question of the day. What is the most ridiculous thing someone has tricked you into doing or believing?
Doing or believing.
I can start off on this one. Most ridiculous thing that someone or you has tricked me into doing annually is diving into the coldest water annually every single year at Christmas, before Christmas.
Oh, that makes you tough. You don't have fun doing it.
Yeah, every single year, Christmas Eve, we have to dive into the nearest lake or body of water when it is just freezing outside.
That's a new. It's called the cleanse. Cleanse our souls.
The polar plunge.
The polar plunge, yeah.
And yeah,
it's a thing. Actually, cold. Man, we're on record though. Last year was the coldest in the history of Earth, and we were actually in the water, just me and you. So congratulations. How about you?
Oh man, Marcus, that's a really good one. Most ridiculous thing. I was going to come up with something pithy, like my wife talking me into marrying her, but she would get really, really upset with that because I was the one who tricked her. So it's kind of the odd.
Did we trick them, or did we get tricked by tricking them?
So that was my one, man. I was like, doggone, man, that's a great question, And then they I had this one every April Fools. My kids are like 21, 27, 28 right now. And I've been doing this ever since Bill Belichick started coaching and winning. And I will do a dummy post about how Bill Belichick is, resigning or moving to the Bengals or something. And every year, my one daughter will take the lead and she'll get, oh my gosh. And then my son, of course, like, Dad, because he's connected, right? He's getting live feeds on everything. Bill Belichick literally can walk outside and get in his car. And my son will like, hey, Bill Belichick just went to this car. So he's like, but for me, man, that's a good one. That's a good question. So that's what do you got, Marcus?
I've had a lot of time to think about it. Tricking me into, I had to say cooking, like recipes. Like what we do, a crawfish boil here every year. And the way I learned how to cook crawfish, they were like, this is the only way you do it. This is the best. You do it like this, you put the water in there and do it. And then I think it was a few years back, right before quarantine, this kid rolled in on me. He had to be 18, 19 years old. And I don't remember why we hired him to cook the crawfish and I wasn't doing it, but for whatever reason, my brother was there. My whole crew, we were sitting there watching this kid. I think it might have been Easter or something. And of course, we're all over there surrounding. We're like, hey, this is how you need to do this. He's like, no, I got a different way. Just trust me. He's like, I understand the way you've been doing it. It works. It does. But I just got this way I like to do it. Just let me show it to you. Don't trust me. Don't do any of that. Just let me show it to you. And man, we were talking smack because I come from a family full of Cajuns, man. They'll literally kill you if that stuff doesn't. That's like, you can't even come back, hang out if you don't get this right. Am I lying, Hunter?
No,
it's the real deal.
It's got to be spicy.
It's got to be good.
Extra spicy.
So we get back, and sure enough, man, he cooks them and delivers the batch over, and it was the best. It was better than we were doing it. Not only that, when I went back to one of the Cajun family reunions, I got put in charge of cooking, and they were like, hey, this better be good. And I did it the new way that kid showed me. And they were like, that's awesome. You cooking the whole time. And I was like, okay. And I even tried to do it the new way, and they would come over and scream, like, no, you got to do it this way. I'm like, trust me, or don't trust me. Just let me freaking do it. Just let me do this for you, and I'll just show you. So I think that is how, when you're young, it gets put into you. It's not necessarily good, bad, or indifferent. It's just the way, right?
Yeah.
Mine, I remember one time, like when I was just starting to play guitar, this guy had me come join him to play his set, and I realized halfway through he was getting paid to have me play his show. It's like, very clever, sir. Very clever.
That's called mentoring.
Yeah, that's what that is.
What I do not what was I can't remember was Huck Finn or Tom Sawyer. It's one of those books that we had to read growing up, right? That you're supposed to read in like probably junior high. Where didn't Tom Sawyer get Huck Finn to paint the fence or whatever? Or maybe I had it backwards, but so he kind of pulled that on you.
Yep, exactly.
Mr. Miyagi too, right?
That's right, man. I was going to say some of that stuff's lessons. It's the best way to learn lessons.
Hunter went there, Mr. Miyagi. So he's got the depth of that's our Marcus. That's our generation. That is. So he knows that.
He put me on the old classics. I mean, growing up.
From the minute I walked into the house, I have a hunter and an axe, and both of them are sharp. And I send him a hunter, he's deadly. He's Miyagi trained, and he's got a little bit of Cobra Kai in him. He's me too. I didn't hold back on either.
Marcus,
I let life shave him out.
I'd like to come down and visit you down there and just see your I'm sure you got the compound where you got like you can go out and shoot guns, do some hand to hand. Got the kids.
That's why
got the kids.
Valhalla. Yeah, man. Yeah,
cool, man.
I live in Valhalla. If y'all wonder, it's a real place, and that has everything he just said and more.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's get in.
Yeah, I was gonna give you a brief background that we have. Today we have a great guest for you guys. Chris Miller is a retired United States Army Special Forces colonel who served as acting United States Secretary of Defense. He previously served as director of the National Counter-Terrorism Center as well. He's also a retired U.S. Army officer and began his military career as an enlisted infantryman in the Army Reserve. He transferred to the Special Forces and served in numerous command and staff positions within the 5th Special Forces Group, Airborne. Chris participated in the initial combat operations in Afghanistan in 2001 and Iraq in 2003. In addition to numerous follow-on deployments to both theaters and his extensive interagency and joint special operations experience. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Thanks for having me. I couldn't imagine a more meaningful rollout. I guess this is the book launch officially, in some ways, but I don't want to talk about the book. I want to, thank you for what you've done since you left and what you're doing.
We're going to talk about it. And that's the difference. I remember back when I started doing this, you couldn't get books online. That's not how it worked. And I remember when that was coming on, all the authors were like, it's going to ruin everything. I was like, nah, it's going to be a transition. And now you can do a book tour that, not only on the road, but virtually, which is great.
Yeah.
I love the road doing that, going into, someone told me one time, you can't ever be in a bad mood in a bookstore. And
true.
Like you walk into like a big, like a Barnes and Noble, the way that just everything that's in there, it's a good time. I had a blast.
Well, hey, what was that like when you saw your book on the shelf for the first time?
No one's ever asked me.
It must have been like, doggone, it's for real.
Humbling. Yeah. You got to understand, I was still in the military. I had the military mindset, so it was more like orders and this. No one's ever asked me that.
Oh, I didn't mean to put you on the spot because the publisher, they're like the best selling book to come out of our war is your book. I was like, that's a good sign.
Yeah. No, it was to be chosen to carry that one was something.
It's a heavy burden.
Yeah. Right.
It's also such an honor to be able to tell all the guys' stories and keep their memory alive. I mean, as long as that, it's not about the book selling, it's about the story being told and repeated over and over. And as long as that carries on, those guys will always live on.
Well, the way I figured that if it wound up on TNT or on Memorial Day and Veterans Day,
yeah,
then we did well.
The movie.
Yeah. And then how I know it got solidified is I've run across an individual or excuse me, a couple that named their son after one of my teammates.
Yeah.
From all of them. Yeah. All of them have been renamed. Yeah. Look at some of them. Yeah. So that's, you can make the movies and the books, those can burn, and then you can't see that, but that was when we got it done.
That must have been surrealistic for you guys to have that impact. And I know, you end up going, well, this is the direction, our faith has taken us, but that must have just been like to have such an impact. Dude, I remember, you don't remember, I was on that, you went out to the basic training brigade in South Carolina with our good friend, Kent Solheim, who was part of the operation come up there.
How about that?
And you know, well, yeah, Kent come on, don't give Kent any credit.
You know what? I'm not going to anymore.
Well,
Kent's got to work harder.
Yeah, I know. I don't even. What a terrible, awesome, terrible.
I know. Kent, you know, he's got like, you know, decided to.
Teeth, you know, his breath smells like NyQuil all the time, probably, or some kind of something from Bed Bath. His hair is always perfectly combed. Even when we were on that freaking mountain, after days, he would take his helmet and his freaking hair would just be perfect. He had that like a Mentos smile. Dude, missing a leg still runs faster than me.
He's
Right.
like Joe.
He is. That's him, man. Like, oh yeah, that's him.
Yeah.
Can't remember.
Yeah. And then Kent, you know, he's the quintessential Green Beret, man. He is like the poster boy. And then you know, Kent, when he's not like working full time as an Army colonel and pushing troops and like really training the next generation, mentoring. That was why it was so cool to see you at that thing, because that was the first time I'd ever, you know, I ran across you back there coming on 20 years ago, but of course didn't know you. When we went up that damn mountain, which was epic, you know, dude, it was, I know you were a hell of a lot hotter and a lot more hurt than we were, but I just remember how hot it was that day. I remember the sun comes up and the sun, dude, I didn't know the sun could come up so early. I don't know whether it was where we were in the world or something, but it was like 5 o'clock.
Right?
The sun.
That must be some kind of dent in the earth where we were at, because it would freeze or it'd be hot as hell. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
What was up with that? What was up with that? And the sun comes up, and dude, it was like, I'm not kidding you. It was like 85 Fahrenheit in the morning. I was like, this is gonna be a day. But you know, so Kent was there, and then you know, Kent now is mentoring, and he brought you in for that professional development for the kids. Well, you can't call them kids, the young soldiers, to hear you, and he had the cadre, and to hear you and your ability to talk to them and meet them where they were and to tell them your story. I mean, I was just in awe. I just like, and then they'd be like, does anybody else have anything to say? And I'm like, I'm not saying anything, you know. And then the one guy, the Intel guy that was on there, he'd say something. You're like, typical Intel guy, right? You're like, dude,
yeah, that's it.
He had to say something. I was like, just let Marcus go.
They have to say something.
Just let Marcus go. And then he'd come up with, well, then the Bod 15 raid on the QR 56 that we had flying overhead. But the way you communicate, and then Kent would close out with Kent, like, so when he's not like either doing PT, mentoring people, he's got that nonprofit where he's helping out veterans. You're like, I do not like Kent at all, because he's the person that I want to be. And he's just like still giving back while he's on active duty. And he'll probably get in trouble for us talking about it. He'll have his general come in there like, Kent, we heard you on Marcus Luttrell's show and reference. So we don't care, because Kent's the best, man. I'm glad you still keep up with him. It was a super meaningful event for us.
That's the first time that had ever happened. I was actually nervous when we were all together for the first time. That was just because, I mean, every angle was covered down on there, and it was something to hear, because we just started talking. We hadn't all talked about that. No,
done a long time ago, but timing is
the wars never ended. They were still fighting. All the guys were still deploying.
Well, I didn't know, like, the two Rangers there were awesome, you know. And I knew, obviously went up the hill with them, or they flew in that night or the next night. But then
we had.
Yeah. And then the Intel guy, frankly, was great too. I was making fun of him, but I never knew all that stuff. I was like, huh? Which, Marcus, we got like, I don't know if we're supposed to talk shop on your show, but the fact that, you know, they had all this exquisite intelligence and all that. You know how much got down to the ground force? This much.
We were joking about it.
Dude, nothing. Sorry, I didn't mean to frequency hop on you. Whatever. We'll talk about more other stuff, but I just want to say thanks.
Freaking make fun of them for something. They can't be perfect. You don't be an asshole.
Well, it's so interesting now, you know, all these years later, to have all of these different people put all the puzzle pieces together, because it was such a shit show when it was going on, obviously. But now, and there was a lot of emotion after that, and a lot of guys had a really hard time after that. But now that all of these years have gone by, it's like y'all can all talk about it now without
the only reason it turned into a shit show is because everyone was in there and it was pure guerrilla, kind of all the tech and everything. And so as we've had time to reflect on it, when I talk to people, they'll come up and say, man, I was doing this, but I had this problem and this is why. I was like, well, it wasn't a problem, actually. What was going down was this unit was coming in and blocked that with this, that, and the other. It had nothing to do. And they were like, really? I'm like, yeah. So you got to understand, everybody was in there.
Yeah.
And it makes them feel better when they hear that, because it went down and then it disappeared.
Yeah, a lot of people think certain things are their fault. Well, we were on our way and got turned around. We should have been able to go. And it's nobody's fault. It was just a complete shit show.
I talk about this in a chapter in the book, and that I described it exactly as you just did. I said it was a shit show. And what you said, something really powerful. Two things, if I could be so bold as to comment. If you want me to be quiet, just like do this, like stop talking, Chris. One is I still am learning stuff. And like you said, you'll be out at VFW, or you'll be at an event, and somebody will start talking, and I will learn something every time. Somebody else had a role that I had and the story's never been told. I got to tell you, man, I don't know if you want to go there, but I really think that it's a story that needs to, we need to bring everybody together. And that's why I like what Kent was doing.
That would be great. That would be so much fun. That would be a mini series that would last forever, dude.
Because it's a lessons learned, and you're all about passing it on. That's what we're all about now. And you're not old. I'm old. It's all about passing on. Like, hey, and the young kids won't care. We were talking about your sons and your family, the young kids, and mine are the same way. They never listen to me, but we got to do it. That when you were out there at South Carolina at Fort Jackson, about 3 kids came out of there with a different view that's going to help them down the line. And you were really good about that. And number 2, so I'm not putting any pressure on anybody, but I just think the story, what you said, the story has not completely been told. People still have pieces of it. And then the second point, it's so true about what you said about how we're older now and the emotion. It's so fun to see. Well, I have a problem because I call everybody out. Like, we'll be at an alumni event or we'll be at a association event, and these 2 dudes that literally hated each other in 2001, that literally were going to kill each other because they hated each other so badly, are now best friends, and they're all weepy and hugging each other. And I call them out. I'm like, whoa, stop right there. Stop right there.
Like, what I had to deal with you two? So
no, seriously. But it is so true that now I had, oh my gosh, like we had this boss. He was like remember Band of Brothers with the company commander? It was the guy who played in Friends.
Good Lord, man, we were watching that last night.
David Schwimmer.
How do you pronounce Captain Sobel's who he played on? Yeah.
So we had one of we had.
Last night.
Were you really?
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's timeless. So remember, when they got done at the end of the war, they were like talking, and they go like, "Hey, do you think we would ever have been this tight as a fighting force if we didn't have the captain being such an absolute a-hole to us?" And it was the same thing. We had an experience like that before we went into Afghanistan in 2001. And we had a commander that was really, really tough. I mean, he was really tough. And I'm telling you, man, we carried that with us for 20 years. I never did this, but he was the man who will remain nameless. Like some sort of, that's out of that Harry Potter series, right? They were like, and I ran into this guy last year at an event, and I was like, we got to put that behind us, and I just went up and gave him a hug.
That's awesome.
Well, because you're talking about 2 different worlds. It's like turning around and looking back at an avatar you got to run around in. It's just
Yeah.
I was thinking about while y'all are talking, and I don't know why I've never thought about this before, but in this war, I mean, this is one of the biggest operations gone. I mean, obviously, it is probably the biggest operation gone wrong. There needs to be like a patch or something that all of y'all get. Everybody that was involved.
Oh, it's a great idea.
Almost, like in Vietnam, there was all different kinds of just memorable missions or whatever that happened, and somebody can say, I was part of that, and you know what that was. Why not have something like that for Red Wing?
Yeah. I can always tell when I run into somebody because the way they respond, they kind of sit back, they always take a breath and they do their head like this. And like, oh.
Yeah.
Oh, right. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. This is the first time I've been able to talk to you about it one-on-one. So I don't mean to like be dragging this up, but you play a role as I know it's got to be a heavy burden for you to bear and you and your family to bear, but I think you carry it lightly and you realize that this is the path that the Lord's put you on. And you accept that, but it's got to be really surrealistic for you guys to be literally, you are the face of the war, because there are a few other legendary figures that came out of that, but so much of it was a special operations war and a lot of these guys are still serving, And I just, man, I don't know how you do it.
Yeah.
I mean, the freaking guys are still in.
Yeah, there's so many guys that we can't talk about that have such huge roles.
Well, hey, first of all, to go back to Captain Soul, Band of Brothers, with that Band of Brothers, my brother and I watched that exact scene last night, and we said that exact same thing, because when I watched that as a kid, I was like, dude, that guy's a dick. I mean, he's freaking mean. Oh, and I had instructors like that.
Sure.
And then watching it last night, my brother and I were like, how about that dude? I was like, that's the guy who made him that tough. How badass. He's actually a great leader. They were only with him for a few weeks, but hell was longer. So and he never gets any credit for that. I ran across on a golf course one time, my instructor Getka. I mean, I was a SEAL for a while. I thought I was a badass. And I was literally on a freaking golf course, bro. And he's like, Latrell. And he said, I almost pissed myself when he said my name. I never forget his voice, just because he was really good at yelling at me. Like his voice, where he came from in the country, articulated my name well when he yelled. And said it was some damn authority. And I'll never forget the hammers I had that pounded me into this, because I would have never made it through that.
He snapped you right back in, though.
Man, just like that. And hey, that's what they're for. What do you care if they like you? They're young. Yeah. When it's like kids, like, man, I ain't your dada. I don't give a shit if you like me or not. I'm gonna get you freaking right.
Yeah.
I got kids I gotta love, and I still treat them hard. So they serve their purpose, man.
Isn't that the power of, I mean, that's the transformative power of the way we do things in our military. I don't think it's that way all across the world. Sometimes you get this like American, like, oh, we do things differently, we're special or something. But I really think in that regards, the way we train and mentor people that come into the military is different. Like I saw it. I'm down here at 7th Special Forces Group. Hey man, I retired in 2014. I was like, I don't know how special operators work. I'm down here with Green Berets. They let me walk along and see them on one of their exercises. I was like, I want to see how they do things now. I wanted to see what new equipment they had, how they were integrating technology and all. I walked along, and it's just like to hear the stories of kids. My thing is always, I'm like, hey, what'd you do wrong to end up in the Army? They start laughing. And every story is so transformative. Either it was go to the Army, go to jail, flunked out of college, was literally sitting there going, my life, I'm going to end up in jail if I don't get my stuff together. But that self-awareness, and then to have like a structure that will take those people in and then form them differently, and change how they view life in a good way. It's just so, and then you got that on the golf course where your old instructor, and you just snap right back into like where you were when you were
like, hey, 17, you guys are special kids. I was like, really? Have you seen what they do? They beat us every day. Do you do that to your special freaking kid? Matter of fact, when we weren't in combat, they would stick me underwater for 6 to 8 hours a day with a couple of my buddies. We must have been so damn special, or we're just freaking crazy. Either way, we're the ones.
It was the world's greatest adventure.
Come to find out, it was the world's greatest adventure. It took me getting all the way to here to know that. She's the best. Yeah. She'll say something to me like 3 words, just like that. The other day, I was kind of getting uneasy about something. She's like, well, you might as well utilize it, take advantage of it. Instead of looking like it was trying to hit me, she's like, well, fight it, work it. And I was like, oh, you know what I mean? It just takes a couple of words from either your spouse or your pal to turn it around. But when it comes to special forces, I always laughed about that. You just said it too. Like, how special are you? You have to whip their ass every day.
Yeah.
I mean, all you give them is shiny things and toys.
But
and
it
things
is
that blow up.
amazing how you can take kids, and not everybody that goes into the military is, walking a line of going to be in trouble or whatever.
Your SF dudes are
But not all of them.
bullshit.
Anyway,
I'm pretty sure about 99.8, maybe 7%.
okay, it is crazy that, like he said, you can take these guys and like Play-Doh, mold them into just these awesome warriors that have not just the ability to fight for our country, but their honor and integrity and just their reason for living at that point changes. And that's so cool. And that's who they carry on to be for the rest of their lives. That goes into their marriage, that goes into just who they are as people.
My dad had a great line when I decided at 17 I needed a signature to join the reserve, and he said, Chris, my dad wasn't all about like giving big speeches. He goes, the Army makes a good man better and a bad man worse. And I'll tell you what, and I was like, rolled my eyes. Yeah, whatever. Stuck with me, obviously. How many years later? It's so true. But what you said, I was going to say, hey, Marcus, I want to try some. I got another thesis on special operators. They're all frustrated athletes.
Yeah,
they're all like, I should have made All-State high school, or I got screwed over by my coach, and they're trying to make up for not being, first team or something. What do you think? Try that. Give me some feedback.
Two guys in our crew that I grew up with, we called them the athletes, and the trumpets, right? Because they had a band playing for them and everything. Got uniforms, and they got the military. It's almost like your bastard stepbrother or your cousin. Yeah, that's us. I try to point that out to people, like, no, you guys are wonderful. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, the wildest Mustang makes the best pony or best horse, right? So,
yeah, right.
And the reason they say this thing's made of clay, because you can mold it. And like you take those, the sockets wrapped in completely. Don't worry about all that. But when they throw those guys like us in there, man, and when it comes back out with discipline, it's relatively the same thing. And I always thought, man, they throw us in our early 20s, and because we had war, we got stuck at that. Like the reason you and I talk the way we do is because that's how we talked when we went in.
Never thought about that. That's exactly right.
Once manhood showed up and like kicked us in the face, we got stuck there. And then discipline started flowing in on that, when most people have an advantage to where they can cultivate that part. We didn't have that because another war kicked off. And then for every episode that we went through in that receive, reflect, respond kind of attitude, before we could go back and worry about it, another one came in there. Because we
never thought about that.
That's a fighter, it's just like, man, my chief had to teach me this. He's like, you know what's happening to you, right? He would always tell me, he's like, I'm just sharpening you. He's like, life is sharp. This is what this is. He's like, you signed up for this. He would always remind me that. He's like, I thought you wanted to be a badass. I'm like, yeah. He's like,
just calling you out.
All the time. Never slow down on me.
Gothero?
Yeah, man. He'll still call me up. This dude's a baddest sumbitch on the planet, drives a Prius and smuggles cats from rescue shelters to their new owner. This is where they hide this dude. I mean, he's the baddest man on the planet of Earth. And I'm not kidding. This is a real dude.
This guy,
it's hilarious.
It's like, if you see him, you would never know he was a special operator. I mean,
man, he hides it, dude. Now
he is like, he looks like just the best dad, like a dad. He just looks like a great dad that would just love you so much and never yell at you. But he was one of Marcus's chiefs.
He's my sea dad. He's like always been my entire life. He caught me the minute I got there.
Yeah.
He spotted me. He's like, your ass is going with me. I'm like, Roger. He's like, I want you on the edge where the demons live. I'll pull you back when you had enough. That's the first thing he said to me. And I was like 23. I was like, yeah, let's do that.
What do you think he saw in you?
And that's what some of them, those men, you could tell that they were like that when they were younger.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And they can see that. You can recognize yourself. But even though it's in a different kind of wrapped in something different, just by the mannerisms. He was with me. That sucker never left my side, man.
So I think when it comes, I mean, it's obviously not talk about you too much. We'll talk about him, but
Talk about. I mean, what?
yeah.
Well, we're going to talk about Marcus's favorite subject.
Well, but I do, right. But I do think that with in regards to Marcus, when he was younger, what I've heard his mentors say is that you could beat Marcus to death and he would always get back up for more. Like
Never quit. That's
he wasn't the fastest or whatever, or the strongest, but he would not quit. He just always kept going. I mean, that's what everybody says about you.
Terminator core.
Yeah.
That's all I got.
So I think
like
they saw in him is that no matter what's going to go through with this guy, he's not going to stop. And we can train that into whatever they needed. They could mold him perfectly because he wasn't going to.
And a happy attitude.
Yeah.
Right. That's it.
I mean, yeah. If you're gonna, once you realize that everything down here has been trained to hate me, kill me, come at me no matter what, then you kind of like, all right, well, I might as well have a pretty good. When you come at me with it, I'm like, that's a good one. Yeah. I mean, wow, that was good.
Right. Yeah. That's
you switch it. So then it's just kind of you see things for the way they are.
Yeah.
Yeah. That becomes a suit that I call that like the rocket fuel. When you come to that level, when you have that realization, it's like it takes you to another level. I also think when you realize it's all about selfless service and it's not about you. Like I'll tell you, I didn't figure that shit. Excuse me, I didn't figure that out till I was like in my 30s. I think I always was a little. I think you talk to the people. The fun thing now is you can talk to the people you worked with when you were younger, and when you're a leader, you never know if they're being authentic, genuine. They probably want a 3-day pass or something if they're being nice to you. So I'm always was hesitant to go like, oh, I'm a really good leader. Because you're like, no, they want something, right? They want something. But now that you're older and you go back and you talk to people and you have a different relationship with the people that you work with, that's one of the things that comes up. I think I was authentic and a selfless servant then, but when my whole being took that in, when my heart, my mind became aligned with being a selfless servant and being a servant leader, man, that was like rocket fuel, man. I don't know about you, but like that changed everything. And then number 2 is what you brought up, which is when you realize like, hey, this is how it is. Might as well just embrace it and channel that to give me energy and positivity. It's a game changer. I wish my problem was, I just wish I would have known that when I was like 21, and I wasted like 10, 15 years trying to figure it out. But wow.
In their 20s. I feel like nobody gets it in their 20s.
Oh.
You think you have it, but it's just not there.
That's the fuel that keeps you going.
Yeah.
And what happened to us, this is the only thing I can rationalize, is that, remember our generation? I mean, we were fed. Like the movies we were fed, from everything was like, you get big, fight, feed, breed, boom, boom, boom. And then we get into an opportunity where we go in there and we apply that. 2 wars, 20 years. You want to talk about road testing something? You made us into something you can't believe. The only way you temper something that was created like we were is you got to put death around it. Our elders act the way they do because of the amount of death that's around them all the time. You and I have seen more death at a young age, so it catapults us into that freaking bracket. You think like that. That's the only way I can think, is because death's always around.
Huh. Yeah, I mean that was like there's some sort of like poem or cliche about that. That was always. I mean, for
by accident. It's
for
not
20
great.
years, death just like lurked right there. It was always there. I mean, I think I hadn't thought about that, man. You're like bringing up a lot of stuff. In my book, I talk about my uncles were all World War II vets. My dad was he was the niche generation, so he went to Korea, and they'd be like, "Yeah, Korea wasn't a real war," and they'd be all, they weren't big. A couple of them were drinkers, but they weren't big drinkers. But every time we had like a family reunion, all the men would get together and they'd start busting each other's balls about, like you were in the Navy, like Quada, the iron bottom sound, like whatever, kamikazes. I was a Marine. That was like constant in my family. And then my dad was like the young one, and they're like, and Harvey, you're a war, Korea. That wasn't even a war. That was a police action. but you talk about like defining experiences, and I picked up on that too, and I know you did too. Just around, like listening to those stories, and you're like, wow, man, these are real men here.
So
Yeah.
I ran into one of our elders at a SEAL reunion from Bud's class 1.
Oh yeah.
Bumped into him by accident. I was fetching beers for somebody else, one of the other ones.
For the chief.
One of the chiefs.
Yeah.
Because your age is rank. You can't get above it. You can't get behind it. And if you're younger, you're always a pussy. Excuse me. You know what I'm talking about. And he looked at me. He's like, you knew me, piece of. He didn't care what I'd been through because it wasn't nothing. That's it. Look, we collect scars in this family, and you got to come down here and bleed. And we come down here to make the story. So when you and I get back up there, you better have something to tell. It's kind of like your key to get in the gate. So, I mean, think about that. And with our guys, it's nonstop. I mean, the story, when you sit around, just listen to them jokers go to work, that's my favorite. I'm around a campfire. I don't care if you're a billionaire, astronaut, whatever, or the poorest son bitch on the planet, around a fire with your boys telling them stories is the best. We all gravitate.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I want to learn more about you. You were the Secretary of Defense under Trump, right?
Yeah, last 73 days, not a lot went on. Pretty quiet time.
But that's still an amazing title to be able to be given.
That's why they brought you.
What was that like getting that?
So, I joined the Army Reserve when I was 17, served. I was from Iowa City, Iowa, and a lot, I think, like Marcus, you're raised by people of values but it was all about, looking forward. And so then I went then I went special forces, but at the end of the day, I retired. I spent like 35, 36 years, either as a government employee or as a military person. And then, I got fixated. I was in this horrible job at the Pentagon. I was a civil servant, I was like government employee because my wife wasn't going to move. We lived in.
No one knows about, that's the biggest mystery down here is that sucker. It's like the pyramid over in Egypt.
Yeah, like what is a civil servant?
Like no one knows.
It's like when you go down to the post office.
CIA, Jason Bourne.
It's like you are a government employee, like 4 million of us. Like when you go to the post office, you go to the Social Security office, and the person that handles your stuff, that's a government employee. I was just like a government employee, bureaucrat, moving paper around, versus a political appointee, which is like each administration gets to bring in like 2,000-3,000 people, and they're political appointees. They're not civil servants. Civil servant goes through all administrations. It's a job, right? You get your.
How many of those do we have? Do you know, like who that CSs are?
In the Department of Defense, there are 1 million civilian employees. Like, don't wear a uniform. Right, they're like handling supply transactions at Fort Bliss or whatever.
But how did you get to be a civil servant? So you were actually in the Army before that. Obviously, we went through that. You were there for Red Wing. So how long did you actually serve as a soldier role?
Joined the reserves at 17 and left as the Army. I retired in 2014. So I joined in 1983 as a reservist, weekend warrior type thing. Went to college, retired from the Army after I think I was 27 years as an officer. Retired in 2014. My wife we'd moved all over during our career. And my wife said, we're not moving anymore. The kids were kind of that age where they were getting into high school. And my wife and I decided that we weren't going to move our kids around during their high school years. And, the Army in its infinite wisdom's like, oh no, you're moving. So I resigned. Oh yeah. And so Marcus, I go to him, I'm like, hey, my one sole requirement was when my kid was a senior, I wanted to be there for their senior year. They didn't care. They could care less. My kids were like, whatever. We want to talk to you, Dad. But I wanted to be there for their senior year. So they wanted to send me overseas for one of my kids' senior year. And I went to my leadership and I just said, I'm begging you. I will next year, you can send me to Antarctica. I don't care. You can send me anywhere you want. They're like, hey, the way the Army works is you stand by to receive orders. And if you don't like them, you can quit. I was like, Roger that. So I retired. but my wife wasn't going to move anymore. And I thought I could talk her out of it. She's like, you didn't hear me. I said, we're staying here. I was like, she goes, you can go wherever you want, but we're staying here.
Let me rephrase that. Your ass can go anywhere you want.
That's what it was. So if you're in DC, I retired out of Washington, DC, out of one of the special mission units, whatever, doesn't make any difference. And so if you're in DC, what are you going to do? It's a government town. Everybody's a government employee. So I got a job as a government contractor and then civilian. So I just became this person at the Pentagon that, you know, was a retired Army guy who changes into a suit and goes and does the same, you know, and just starts pushing paper. But and the thing is, when you're a government employee, you know, you can do another career and whatnot. But I hated my I shouldn't say that. I had issues with my boss. Go figure, Marcus. Like, oh, special operator having problems with his Air Force F-15 pilot boss. That was a combo. And my buddy was running counterterrorism for the president in what they call the National Security Council. The National Security Council does all the foreign policy, national security advising to the president and the vice president. It's located right next to the White House. So I always tell my kids, like, if you are asked to interview for a job, always interview because, Hunter, you listening? You guys back there listening? Always interview for the job because one, and you're going to learn something and you might get the job. And then it's at the White House. So I'm like, yeah, I haven't been to the White House in like 30 years. So I go interview for the job and I start running counterterrorism. It's called for the National Security Council, where there's everybody in the government. Government's huge, right? So there are pieces and parts, you know, Department of Treasury, CIA, FBI, Homeland Security, Department of Defense. All these people have a role in counterterrorism. And I got fixated on this idea, Marcus. I got fixated. Go figure. I did my net assessment and I had this thing against Al Qaeda, like it still burned that they attacked us in 2001. And they were still,
that pissed some guys off.
Yeah.
And they were still out there in the field. And it's kind of felt to me like the government had just kind of not moved on, but wasn't taking it as seriously. So I looked at
knows how that works. I mean, that's part of it. And some of us are designed to make sure y'all freaking remember.
Yeah.
So I was like, I remember being in Afghanistan one time in like, I think it was like 04, 05, and everybody had moved on. Everybody was focused on Iraq. Like and there were a bunch of us. I was the youngest, but there were some serious old timers, like really legendary figures that we can't talk about. And they did this solemn oath. They're like, we will not quit. We will keep working until they're defeated. Well, we didn't think it was going to take 20 years. And then I'm the last one left. They'd all retired. They're all old men now and women. And I was the last one left. And I kind of took that oath pretty seriously. It seems silly, right? You know, and it was around a fire, Marcus, believe it or not. It was one of those things. And we were up.
Yeah, those are serious. Like when you make one of
those. And I took that, like, you can call me stupid, you know, fine. I've been called worse. But I was like, no, I made a vow to see this one through. So I got in that position and I learned that Al Qaeda had been seriously, seriously weakened from all of our attacks against them over the years. We called it mowing the grass. Remember, Mark? It's like, just keep killing them off. Eventually there's, you know, not going to be anybody left. And it worked. And I was surprised. So I just decided we got to stick with this. So I was in a position to, there were 7 senior leaders in Al Qaeda left. I was like, so I'd ask all the young kids, hey, Marcus, remember, go to the intel sergeant who isn't going to like give you politically correct, like, oh, you know, on this hand or on this hand. They just tell you what they know. And I'd be like, hey, man, what happens if we kill Zawahiri had replaced bin Laden?
Yeah.
So we're like, we got to get to this guy, bin Laden's replacement, and then we can declare the war over, right? Like we kill this guy and all of his subordinates. We can say Al Qaeda's defeated. Now, I get all this crap like, oh, you can't defeat terrorism. I was like, I know we can't defeat terrorism. That's a verb. We can defeat Al Qaeda, noun, group, and defeat. I won't go bore everybody to tears, but you can defeat terrorist groups or armed groups, right? We all know this. So I just got fixated. I got obsessive compulsive disorder.
They're the ones you can with countries and everything. You got that means you have to kill everybody. With that, it's like anything else. We go in there and root them out. We'll dig right out of there so fast. What do you think we're into? I mean, if we're fighting terrorists, We're trained terrorists. We're trained to cause terror to them. So much so that there won't be another group coming back up in there after them because of what we did to them.
Hey, Marcus, thanks for saying that. I could not pass my polygraph for the longest time because there was a question about, do you support terrorism or something? I can't remember exactly what it was. And finally, the poor kid that was running doesn't compute. Finally, I'm like, what the heck? I'm a special operator. We basically do, and they're like, what? And their eyes go different directions. And finally they brought in an old timer's like, don't ask that question to him anymore. So I got really fixated on that. And then, special operator, right? I'm talking way too much. Special operator, what do you do, Marcus? Figure out the network, figure out the incentive system, communicate, execute. So that's kind of my little rubric that I use. And I realized the only person that could get us to keep attacking was President Trump. So my buddy was close to President Trump. I wasn't close to President Trump. So I used a surrogate, right? I was like the only person that could tell the CIA, the Department of Defense, everybody that the priority is not, China or whatever. It's we're going to end this war by killing these people off, was the president. So my buddy, Kash Patel, he probably, I don't care. Good dude. And, he'll probably get mad that I said his name in public, but he's kind of a public face now. It's all right. And so he was close to the president. So he would go to the president like, hey boss, this is where we are. And I just execute, right? So we just became fixated, and then we killed off this head of ISIS, right? His name was Zawahiri. This guy was the most evil dude. And I'm not into good and evil typically when you're fighting your enemy, because you want to keep a little distance, emotional distance. But this guy was the definition of evil. Like the things he did to people is beyond comprehension. So we killed that guy. Our counterterrorism forces killed this guy one night. And that's where I met the president face to face, because he was in the situation room watching part of the operation. And at that point, I think the president kind of identified this Miller guy, this guy with the white hair, kind of, tall, dorky, geeky, like he can get stuff done. And then, I got a point. So you asked the question, like, what's the difference between a civil servant and the military? So I was just like a government employee, nothing special, just doing my job like they all do. And then the president asked me if I wanted to become a political appointee. So it just goes on from there. And then just by a bunch of luck, weird circumstances, I ended up for the final bit working for at the Pentagon, running the Pentagon. Well, I'll just real quick, like the president was right. He goes, we have what's the biggest threat against our country? And it was like, at the time, 77,000 Americans were dying each year from illicit drugs flowing up from the border, right? I mean, like that's a lot of people, and now it's 110, 120. President's like, we need to stop that. What's the military doing? And the military is like, we're focused on China. We're focused on China. And I was like, no, we need to focus on the thing that's killing Americans, and we need to secure our border, and we need to actually go out and hunt them down wherever the drug labs are and wherever the doggone drug cartels are. And we need to get really, really aggressive because they're killing our people. And so the president and I were in alignment on that. He thought I could probably help out a little bit with that.
That's awesome. What was your involvement with that? Because that's still, like you said, I mean, the numbers have gone up since then. Do you feel like there was any headway made?
No. It's doggone the Borg of our United States government, based on, it's huge, it's lethargic, it's bureaucratic. And, it became such a politicized issue that President Trump was seen as like, you guys are living down at the border. You know what I'm talking about. That build the wall, and they just turned it into all this crazy nonsense political stuff. But his point was we need to secure our border from illicit flows, whether it's human beings or whether it's narcotics or illegal goods and whatnot. And a lot of the people at the Pentagon, I can just speak for the Pentagon, Homeland Security would try, but there was a lot of resistance because they feel like it's a zero-sum game. If we, like, I'll give you an example, silly radar, just a radar that could be used to look into the Caribbean to see the planes that are flying through. There was a gap in our coverage because one of them had broken. So we need the commander down there and the people said, hey, we needed a new radar. But to do that, now we spend, $800 billion a year on defense. You think we could find a stupid radar, right? You would have thought it was the end of the world. So because we needed to pull a radar from the Pacific to bring it in. And of course, the people in the Pacific were, if you take our radar, the United States is at risk. So we just kept dealing with all this stuff. And there was never that, the whole Pentagon as a whole never came to agree that we needed to use military force on our border. And I don't know. What do you guys think? Because I think that's, the purpose of the military is not only protect and serve, but defend the Constitution, but, ultimately to protect the citizens in the United States. And I thought that was a pretty good use, but there's a lot of pushback for all these reasons that I could go on for the next 3 hours. And you're like, dude, stop talking because this show is not about that. Weird. Great conversation. Thanks.
You bet, bro. I appreciate you, man.
Yeah, thanks a lot for doing this. Same, and all the best. If there's anything I could do to be of service to you guys ever, and I'm serious, thanks for what you're doing with, you got a crew down there of a lot of people. It's really neat to see your network. And I kind of on the fringes with a lot of things. So it's really cool what you guys are doing. And thanks. It is a calling. And this is how I think this is what we do for the next phase of our life until somebody decides something different.
That's right. All right, brother. God bless you, man.
How can people find you? Like, how can people get the book and everything?
Soldier Secretary. I forgot I'm traveling right now and I gave one of my books away. I should now pull up the thing. I'm not like, I don't do LinkedIn. I need to do that. But I came up in a community where you didn't do that. And so I still don't do it. But so Soldier Secretary by Chris Miller, had a great co-writer who's down in Austin, by the way. Hey, if you can, what's his face? I'm honored to do your podcast as the coming out party. But what's that one guy, Rogan? Give Rogan a call. Tell him he needs to bring me on sometime too, man. I'm sure Rogan, like, I know he gets like these military officers on and they're all like, wow. And I'm sure Rogan's like, oh man, I can't do another one of these dudes who just like gives me the party lines and talking points. But me, man, you brought it up. We're all stuck in like 2003 right now. So you give him a call and say, Miller's not a complete, stick up his butt kind of guy. It'll probably be a good interview. All right. So a book is out. It drops February 7th. You can pre-order now. And so I'm learning more about this publishing thing. And Marcus, we're all competitive, even though we act like we're not, because we're special operators, right? We are like, oh, it's all good. Never let them see us sweat, but we are hyper competitive. And I really, really, really want, for no other reason than just to, show the liberal media that we still have a voice out there. And I'd really like to get on the New York Times, go into the belly of the beast and get on the New York Times bestseller list somewhere on there. So it all comes down to pre-order sales, first week sales. So anything you guys can do to help. And I'm making no money on this, and whatever I make, I'll keep some of it. Don't get me wrong, but I plan to cycle in. I'm on 3 nonprofits. One's for veteran suicide. One's Daniel Elkins from Special Operations Association of America, trying to help out veterans and families and those still serving. And then I'm in this last one. I forgot the name of it, but it's a special operations one. So I plan to try to take as much resources I earn off this. If I make any money, I don't think I'm going to make any money on the book, to tell you the truth, to cycle it back into the brotherhood and sisterhood.
Awesome. Well, thank you for your service. You've got an incredible career and just your story is great. Thank you.
We're just getting started. Thank you.
All right.
So much.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody.